Every municipality is a partnership between the town leaders, the public, private businesses, schools, and more. Crucial to their success are building key partnerships with organizations that help the mission of the municipality, organizations like the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. Jay Williams, President and CEO, joins us today to talk about that mission and how the foundation supports the 29 municipalities in the Hartford region, and how his unique background as a mayor, a liaison to local governments for the White House, and a U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development gives him critical insight into the needs of municipalities. We'd like to thank our sponsors at Gateway and Houston Community Colleges. The Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state and local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or our member municipal leaders. Jay, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
We appreciate it. Well, you have an interesting background that eventually led you to come to Connecticut. So first off, could you tell us how you went from, Youngstown, Ohio to the White House and now to the Hartford Foundation?
Certainly. Well, Youngstown, Ohio is where it all started. It sounds like the beginning of a novel or something, but it's not that interesting. I was born and raised in Youngstown, Ohio. It's my hometown. Went to Youngstown State University and really started my career there in banking and ultimately went to work for the city doing community development. One thing led to another, and the city of Youngstown is a town that had undergone significant economic upheaval from the halcyon days of the steel mills and manufacturing to much more difficult economic times. But I was inspired to run for mayor. And I was elected as the first African-American mayor and the youngest mayor in the city's history. And I was serving as mayor of Youngstown, engaged in what I guess was perceived as a lot of innovative approaches to really try to think about reframing a city to move toward a future of economic sustainability and viability. That caught the attention of several other communities across the country and actually across the globe. And as I was serving as mayor, it so happened that a presidential campaign was gearing up. One thing led to another, and I early on had an opportunity to meet then Senator Obama. He was ultimately elected, and while I thought that was great, I was also happy serving my second term as mayor when I got a call from the White House, and that ultimately led to a series of conversations, and I was invited to join the Obama administration in 2011 and ended up serving 6 years in Washington, D.C., then ultimately ended up in Connecticut because the board of directors for the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving were going through a CEO search. And based on sort of what they were looking for and where my career path had been, it seemed like a perfect fit. So here I am.
Yeah. So the job was something that kind of drew you to Connecticut. Was there anything else that kind of drew you to make the move to Connecticut in general, where you saw the job and said, yeah, I could live in that state and do that?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So ironically, I had come to Connecticut, the Hartford area, on a couple of occasions during my service in the administration to do some economic development, community development projects, and got a vibe that Hartford and the general Hartford area reminded both my wife and I a lot of home. We're from the Midwest. Lots of assets, also some challenges, beautiful natural amenities, great people. So when I went back to DC with no inclination that there would be an opportunity to come here to for the next chapter of my career, when the opportunity did present itself, I reminded my wife that this is a place that I had some familiarity with. And then when we came to visit during the interview process, we both were struck again about how much this reminded us of home in so many ways. And at the same time, saw lots of great assets and opportunities. So we were both attracted to, I think, the general landscape, the broader community, the people that we met. And again, this career opportunity to be a part of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving as it was going through its next phase and its next evolution just ended up being the perfect fit.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear you say that, so coming from Youngstown, whatever, how much Hartford felt like home. But when you think about it, they do have some similar issues of strong industrial pasts, and now trying to figure out what the next stage is. That's really interesting.
Even as far as the Connecticut Western Reserve. I mean, back in the early part of the century,
Yeah, Ohio was technically
exactly,
part of Connecticut. Yeah,
absolutely. So what's even funny is some of the same town names, here,
get
Avon and
repeated
Richfield.
out there.
Absolutely,
That's really interesting.
absolutely, yeah.
And like we're repeats of some in England. It's pretty
Exactly,
wild.
repeats, exactly.
What is the overall mission of the Hartford Foundation? Who do you serve?
We serve 29 towns in the greater Hartford region, about 750 to 850,000 residents in that region. We are approaching our 100th anniversary, and broadly, our mission is about putting philanthropy into action to create lasting solutions that result in vibrant communities across the greater Hartford region. And that's a mouthful, and it's a broad, encompassing mission that we welcome. But beyond that, we have a strategic commitment that we've been engaged in. And in that strategic commitment, which is in service to our mission, we are engaged in activities that will help to dismantle structural racism and increase equitable social and economic mobility. So, we serve 29 towns, as varied from Hartford and East Hartford out to Marlborough and Hebron and Andover, and a whole host of communities.
All different sizes
and scopes and diversity and interest. And again, a great region.
Awesome. Before we get into some more specifics, what kinds or categories of projects do you work on at the Hartford Foundation?
That's a great question. We have a long-standing commitment to arts and culture, deep investments that we've had in education, and those remain. But I'm very excited about the last several years where we've really tuned our focus or honed our focus into a few broad categories. One is the basic human needs, the physical, emotional, mental well-being of residents in our communities. Employment opportunities, particularly employment opportunities in our communities of color, where the data has demonstrated those are not as pervasive and accessible as they are in the broader community. Arts and culture continue to be an important focus of ours. Resident and civic engagement, which hopefully we'll talk about, really helping citizens to strengthen and raise the voice and participation in their communities in which they live. And the other category that we're really focused on are higher opportunity neighborhoods, so housing and economic and then entrepreneurial activities. So those are the key areas and the outcomes that we've been focusing on for the past 3 or 4 years.
Well, the kind of the main pillars of what you're focusing on. That's
Absolutely.
Really cool. And how do grantees get chosen? Like, could a nonprofit with a branch in the Hartford area but based in Stamford, let's say, apply for grants, or could like a department within a municipality apply for funding for a project?
The answer is yes to both. So we serve primarily, again, our 29-town region, but we are also the largest community foundation in the state of Connecticut and one of the largest in the country. So while we are regionally based, we do have relationships across the state of Connecticut. But to your point, there has to be a very strong and abiding connection to serving residents or organizations in our region, in our 29-town region. So to answer your question, nonprofit organizations can apply through through the website. We have a process, a rolling application process where we make funding available. We on occasion send out requests for proposals where we have a specific need or ambition or aspiration that we will open up for proposals to be received. There are partnership opportunities. So we try to have a pretty wide aperture for organizations to approach us through, again, very specific opportunities or what we call access grants, where we try to make ourselves as accessible to the nonprofit communities in as many ways as possible.
Very cool. And you mentioned that you can apply for that sort of stuff through your website. Is that just hartfordfoundation.org?
HFPG.org. HFPG.org.
All right, I'll flash up on the screen here.
Thank you. It explained the process. So I'm oversimplifying it, but we try to make it a streamlined process where there's a conversation that is held with the staff, and then out of that conversation, we gather some information and have an exploratory opportunity to ultimately that may lead to an invitation to apply. And again, there are others that are sort of just ongoing rolling applications
And
in
they can find
addition
all
to
that
this,
info on the website,
all
and
that information
that's
on the website.
very cool. We want to talk about a few examples of the Harvard Foundation in the news. And there's no shortage of examples, certainly, to pick from. But
But
the first one is obvious for us. You gave 6 groups just over $100,000 to support civic engagement. At CCM, we believe in the impact of not only public service, but community civic engagement. Could you tell us a bit about this grant, the grant funds, and how it's being put to use?
absolutely. And I can also relate to that as a former mayor, the importance of civic
Yeah.
engagement, of citizens being actively involved in their community, raising their voice. And the grant funds that we provided do just that. They help citizens come together, working to build the capacity to address issues. Again, let me be very clear, we are an apolitical, nonpartisan, 501c3, so we don't get
Mm-hmm.
involved in partisan politics.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, civic engagement is not partisan politics, and
Mm-hmm.
people who are desirous of raising their voice and who are desirous of having an active hand in the quality of life in their communities, we think is essential for
Mm-hmm.
the functioning, the well-being, and the functioning of a society. So that's what those grant funds are doing, and we're excited about it. It is something that we've expanded because we just think that it is essential for all of our well-beings, that people have the ability and the knowledge and the awareness involving and engaging themselves in civic life and in society.
So one project in East Windsor, the Hartford Foundation helped establish the Greater Together Community Fund. How does that partnership work? Do you kind of guide the process, need to help them out, or do you just kind of manage the back end and the funding?
That's a great question also. So not only do we have one in East Windsor, let me be clear, we have a community fund, a Greater Together Community Fund in every one of the 29 towns that we
Mm-hmm.
serve, East Windsor being one of them. And that is what or what is called participatory grant making,
Okay.
which is different than when you think about traditional philanthropy, where a foundation has resources and
Mm-hmm.
sort of sets conditions around those resources with
Mm-hmm.
participatory grant and makes the decisions. With
Mm-hmm.
participatory grant making, we have broad parameters that
Mm-hmm.
guide all the 29 towns, but the idea is really for committees of volunteers within those towns to ultimately have the decision making or the
Mm-hmm.
recommendation power as to where they would like the grant funds to be applied in their community. So it
Mm-hmm.
really shifts the decision making. We to your point have to process it, and there's some technical things that we have to
Mm-hmm.
do from a functioning standpoint, but really the decision making,
Mm-hmm.
the thought leadership around what those towns think are in the best interest and the best use of those funds.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they are charged with so that's an
Mm-hmm.
awesome responsibility. We help to equip them and educate them and make them aware of the process.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't Jay Williams or our board of directors or our staff making the determinations. These are volunteers within each of those
Mm-hmm.
29 towns who come together through a committee process, and it's worked very well. Some of the towns want to build walking trails. Some of the
Mm-hmm.
towns are interested in community centers where seniors and young people can come together. Others have used them for help to enhance ambulance services. So it's been a really gratifying experience to see all those towns have that ability, and those are resources we provide them
Mm-hmm.
on a regular basis.
So you have the resources there for kind of broad categories of things and things that you think need help, but as how to actually implement them in the towns, you kind of rely on that town's local knowledge of what they need in their community to actually determine the specifics of how they should go about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have, again, very broad parameters, and when I say
Yeah.
very broad, it has to be nonprofit. It has to be, it can't be political. But the towns can get to a level of granularity and
Mm-hmm.
specificity to suit their interests, and I think that's the beauty of it. It really shifts the decision making and the power to the towns. We
Mm-hmm.
encourage the towns to have a collaborative, diverse reflection of that town's makeup. We provide guidance and
Mm-hmm.
counsel to them, but this is not the heavy hand of the Hartford Foundation saying, "Well, we think this is what's best." If you're in Avon and you're on the committee, or you work with the committee, and Avon wants to do X project, that's great. and Bloomfield wants to do Y project. That's great also. Our role is to really help encourage the participatory part of that. And to also, we replenish those funds. So we've provided them an initial rollout. It was $100,000 for each town. We've just replenished those funds with an additional $50,000 for each of those towns. And we anticipate, with the board support, to continue doing that for a number of years. So we've got a lot of positive feedback, and it really takes grant making and puts it at the grassroots level.
You are listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH 103.5 FM.
You did a backpack giveaway recently at Dunkin' Donuts Park with supplies for about 4,000 kids. That's really great. Kind of a no-brainer in terms of why it's good for children, but could you talk a little bit about the giveaway and other programs you have for students kind of through the school year?
Absolutely. That particular event was in partnership with the Hartford Public Schools, which is the largest school district in our catchment region. We also work with the Alliance districts, which represent school districts in other towns outside. But it's important because, again, we want to, and I hope whether you have school-age children or not, we understand the importance of kids getting off to a strong start. And we don't take for granted the cost and the needs that exist. Some things that might seem fundamental and basic and easily obtained by some isn't always the case. So the supplies, the technological tools and equipment that students need to succeed today, and also a positive environment. So they see adults wishing them well, pining for their success, supporting them as a start. As you mentioned, our own son, who is 12, just turned 12, he starts school this week also, and he is probably a little less than thrilled about it, but nevertheless, we want him and all kids to get off to a strong start. So it's just exciting to see the parents, and also I think sends a message to the parents and to the guardians and to the loved ones that we are here. We are your community foundation, and in every way appropriate and possible, we want to support the educational success of our young people.
At CCM, we have a lot of different efforts going on, but one of our newer ones that we've started doing is we really started focusing on issues around equity in Connecticut. And we started a program, CCM Cares and Representation Matters. We, in cooperation with the Campaign School at Yale, where we were helping people who might want to, specifically from communities of color, who might want to become engaged in local politics on the how-to of how to run for politics and things like that. I know your foundation just started the first ever Connecticut Communities of Color Nonprofit Stabilization Fund, which seems to touch on some adjacent issues. Can you tell us more about that and why it's important for Connecticut's communities of color to have these resources?
Sure, and just as a point of slight correction, we actually didn't start it. We through funding that we provided, but this was exciting because we provided a pair of $1 million grants to two organizations. One, the Prosperity Foundation, and the other, the Hispanic Federation. And it was the Hispanic Federation that really used some of those resources to create the Communities of Color Nonprofit Stabilization Fund, as you referenced. And that's important because our nonprofit organizations across our communities, but specifically in our communities of color, have historically not had the financial resources, have not had the access and the opportunity, have not had the capacity building, the ability to strengthen themselves. So through this investment, the Hispanic Federation is really sending a very strong message that not only are these nonprofits essential, it's essential that they are strong, that they have the necessary expertise and the tools to really serve their communities in a way that benefits us all. And, I've said it before and I'll say it again, when we address and strengthen the challenges and the barriers that exist in our communities of color, we all benefit. And that is indisputable. And the data demonstrates very starkly, unfortunately, that the inequities and the disparities that have far too long plagued our communities of color are something that need to be addressed for the broader well-being. So as you talked about the importance of equity at CCM, we hold the same level of importance and commitment to equity here at the Hartford Foundation and everything that we do.
In addition to the Hartford Foundation, you were on the boards and serve as a member of several other organizations in the area that make a significant impact on our state. Metro Hartford Alliance, Advanced AT, CHEFA. What would you say, from your broad knowledge, is the most important area of concentration for Connecticut as a whole? Is it infrastructure, economic development, housing? What should we be focusing on the state?
That's a great question. Again, I don't know that we have the luxury of focusing on one, thing, one single top priority. We have to, and the organizations that you mentioned really, I think, reflect my experience and commitment to broad community and economic development in an inclusive way. So it is not just enough to say community development or economic development. You have to be very intentional about being inclusive and diverse in those statements and those activities, because if not, we will get what we've seen in the past, where broad swaths of the community are overlooked, underserved, either through intentional or unintentional policy practices, approaches, and in doing so, we harm ourselves. So the amount of talent and creativity and entrepreneurial ingenuity that exists in our communities of color has for far too long gone untapped. So when we think about Connecticut, which is a small state, and tapping into those rich pockets of diversity and inclusivity through our community economic development efforts, that to me has to be amongst the top priorities that we're focusing on.
I agree. And it sounds like, what you're saying, that some people consider community development and economic development to be kind of two separate things, but really they need to be the same in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. To me, and I've said this, that, all economic development is community development. Now, you can have things that are community development that are not economic development, but to me, the broader umbrella is community development. So anytime you're doing economic development, that's about community development, but you also have to engage in things that may not be defined as economic development, but are important and critical to the prosperity and the vibrancy of a community. And in all of those things, in each and every instance, you have to be intentional. And again, I can't stress this enough. You have to be, diversity, equity, and inclusion doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen by simply saying, well, it's a nice to have. What we're saying, it is a must have. It has to be intentional. It has to be deliberate. It does take additional effort, but the outcome is always better. It is always a higher financial return. They're always a richer experience when we do it that way. And that's why I think in being involved, I try to be very selective in the things that I am engaged in, because there are only so many hours in a day. You've only got so much to offer, and I hope to be impactful in the things that I'm fortunate and blessed to be a part of.
Just put you on the spot a little bit more, specifically for the greater Hartford area. If you were given an opportunity to invest a large sum of money, but in only one area of concentration, what would it be?
Oh my. This might sound a bit vague, but one of the challenges that exist here is there are so many communities that are defining themselves by their geographic borders. I mean, they are great places. They offer wonderful quality of life and amenities and unique characteristics, but that's also a challenge. I mean, this is a still relatively small area. So, if I could, I don't know if it's money or a magic wand I need, but to get the communities to really not divorce themselves of the things that make them unique, but also raise the prospect of how powerful it is to be able to be identified as a region, to have the sum of the parts, to be greater than the individual components. And because I think that there are other parts of the country. I've had the privilege to travel across the country during my time in Washington, D.C., and those regions that can embrace their individuality, but also understand the importance of an economic and a region of arts and culture and amenities, and position themselves that way, and think about how to collaborate across geographic borders. Those are the areas that tend to do better than the areas that are so bifurcated and are so balkanized. So I think that's what I would aspire to, and that's part of really what we see as an opportunity as the Hartford Foundation, because while we serve every one of the 29 towns and we want them to feel that we are their individual town community foundation, we also want to remind them that they're a part of the community, and that's where we even use the tagline "Greater Together," because we do think that if we think about ourselves in that context, there are greater things that we can accomplish than we would be able to accomplish on our own.
Yeah. I mean, with our 169 towns, they all have their individual histories that are great, and we love them all. But at the same time, we also know that as a small state, there's, I think in Texas and stuff, there's counties that are bigger than the entire state of Connecticut.
You got it. And
so there's the opportunity for some regionalism there to share some kind of services and save some money or something. Yeah.
Services, opportunities. One of the first things that someone said to me 5+ years ago when I came was, "Jay, remember the number 169." And they then said, "Well, this is why you need to remember that number." And you're right. So there's beauty in that, but there are also, I think, untapped opportunities and really how we think about ourselves.
Yeah. Regionalism is a perennial issue for us at CCM, and I'm sure it will be for years and years to come.
I've got the battle of scars as a former mayor of Youngstown to prove it. So yeah.
You know the struggle. On your website, you say that the Hartford Foundation is seeking to ensure the gifts we receive will last forever. How long is the mission of the Hartford Foundation, and what will it be in the future?
The existence of the Hartford Foundation is intended to be in perpetuity, such that, as I mentioned earlier, we are approaching our 100th anniversary in the year 2025. And while our mission and our strategic commitment may evolve to reflect the needs and the aspirations of the community as they have over many years, our very existence is intended to be forever. And that is both in terms of how we invest the resources that we are entrusted with in the endowment, such that 100 years from now, you and I won't be here. It is very unlikely we'll be here unless there's some technological advancements that
robot bodies,
Absolutely. But 100 years from now, we intend and structure ourselves so that whatever the community needs are 100 years from now, that there would be resources available through the Hartford Foundation for public giving. Again, the mission might be different. The strategic focus might be different, but we should be around to serve. And that's how we think about both balancing the fierce urgency of now and the very acute needs that we have, but at the same time, making sure that we're also in a position to serve those who will come after us through whatever mechanisms exist then.
Yeah, and we've been focusing on that a little bit lately at CCM with our conventions coming up, where our theme is "Get Back to Connecticut's Future." And after a couple of years of the pandemic, where everyone was kind of like, "Oh, we have to deal with this pandemic right now. What do we do? How do we fix this emergency?" Now we're starting to look again at, okay, we're dealing with the stuff on the ground, but what do we want to do 5, 10, 20 years from now?
And when the next crisis comes, because it will come, hopefully it's not a pandemic, but when that next crisis comes, how can we learn from the pandemic that we still are in, but that was so intense and so acute over the past couple of years, that it can help build the resilience that we will need to deal with the next crisis, because they're going to come. It's just a matter of when, and it's how we react to it and what we learn from each of those opportunities.
Yeah. Have you guys been involved with any sort of projects that have come out of the pandemic, like, being prepared for the next one or how to deal with this one? Has that been a large part of what you've been doing for the last few years?
Absolutely. Both starting with ourselves and a resiliency that we had to obtain in order to continue to be of relevance and of assistance to the nonprofit organizations, better use of technology. Frankly, one of the things that emerged out of this, that we were, I say this, that we were on a path to evolving the foundation, but we were talking about it in terms of years. What the pandemic made us do was talk about it in terms of weeks and days. So, we had to become more nimble. we frankly had to become less risk averse.
Hmm.
Philanthropy often, at least community philanthropy, can be a little bit risk averse and
Yeah.
sort of traditional. And we understood the need to be innovative and responsive, to be more proximate to
Hmm.
the challenges in the community. That there is no perfection, to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yep.
To make sure that we had processes that obviously kept fidelity to our obligation to be a good steward of the resources, but not so much that it was an impediment to us trying new things. So all of
Hmm.
that really emerged out of the pandemic and allowed us to emerge as a better, stronger, more relevant and impactful organization. So that was a silver lining
Yeah.
in a very difficult situation.
Well, you got to find them, the silver lines, wherever you can. Is there any kind of charities or organizations elsewhere in Connecticut that you like to, that you've seen that you think would be fun to implement in Hartford? Is there stuff you see other nonprofits doing that you're impressed with, or?
Yeah, so I think we are fairly well represented here in our region.
Hmm.
We do collaborate with our fellow community foundations across the state,
Hmm.
very specifically in the New Haven
Hmm.
area, the Greater New Haven Community Foundation, and in Fairfield County,
Hmm.
in addition to New Britain and some of the others that are across the state. So I'm not sure that there's a specific um, activity that I think exists elsewhere that does not is not present in our region. But one
Hmm.
of the things I do always that we do keep an eye out for are innovative approaches. And and
Hmm.
and I talked about a few minutes ago being less risk averse and being willing to try new things to address some of the challenges,
Hmm.
both challenges and opportunities. So I think always having a ear to the ground,
Hmm.
a willingness to be innovative, to be flexible is important, and to reach out and have partnerships. One of the things that
Yeah.
we have done are partnered with private philanthropies and corporate
Hmm.
philanthropic organizations, because I think an opportunity both in thought partnership and leveraging resources is also something we're excited about. And frankly, one of the things that I also say is from a national standpoint, we think that there's no reason that some of the things that are going on in our region can't be models for national attention to either replicate in other communities
Hmm.
across the country, or us seeing something that's going on in another part of the country and trying to replicate it here if we think it would be of benefit to our communities that we serve.
What do you think about the future of the foundation and Connecticut as a whole? Are you feeling optimistic about Connecticut?
I'm generally an optimistic person. That's
Hmm.
sort of my default posture. So I am optimistic. I mean, I'm very pragmatic about the
Hmm.
challenges that exist in this country,
Hmm.
and the challenge that exists in this state, and the challenges that exist in our region. But that being said, I think the optimism gets me up and it helps drive me and others to think of different approaches and different innovative solutions and tapping into untapped resource or underserved areas that might be a well of inspiration. So yeah, I am generally optimistic. There are days though. I mean, there are days I'm sure that
We
we
all
all
have
have
them,
them
yeah.
that you sort of wonder. But and I think the other thing too is knowing that my wife and I have a 12-year-old son, and what are the things that we can do so that all 12-year-olds and people of younger people can have a fighting chance and say, okay, well, Dad, what did you do when you were in a position to try to help move the ball a little forward or make the place a little better?
Yeah.
And so when my time is, to step aside, I can say, well, this is what we've tried to do, and you guys take it from here.
Yeah. You don't want to be like, we didn't really do anything.
Right? Yeah,
Sorry.
I don't know. It was tough. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I want to be able to say something that.
So you're optimistic, but you know that to get to that place, it's going to take a lot of hard work by all of us.
It is, and that's the key. I mean, there are so many areas that we are unfortunately being divided by politically, culturally, and others. And while that's not new, I am concerned that it's become so much more intense and detrimental. And to your point, however we're going to emerge, we're going to have to emerge together. It doesn't mean that there won't be differences of opinion and different ideology. That's been the case since the beginning
Hmm.
of the dawn of time. But we've got to be able to set aside enough of those differences to find that common ground for the well-being of our society. It's just so in that regard, I think that's occupied a lot of my thought in the past several years.
Understandably. Well, Jay Williams, thank you so much for coming on the show and speaking with us about everything the Hartford Foundation does.
Matt, thank you for having me. Thank you for all that you all do at CCM. It is so critical to our municipalities, our towns, our region, and look forward to continuing to partner with you all.
We'd like to thank our guest, Jay Williams. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Gateway Community College and Housatonic Community College. Learn more at gatewayct.edu and housatonic.edu. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH 103.5 FM. Kevin Maloney is our executive producer, Christopher Gilson is our producer, Harry Drosden on the boards, and I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like, and watch out for a CCM chat series on our YouTube page. CCM's annual convention returns Tuesday, November 1st at the Mohegan Sun Convention Center. This year's convention will be capped off by Connecticut's final 2022 gubernatorial debate. Learn more at ccm-ct.org.